Adam Kuda here for the All Up Blitz Week 4 edition. I have a little tape version for you today as we had a little bit of a scheduling conflict, but don't worry. We got plenty of fantasy analysis. We got waiver wire additions. We got stock up, stock down, bench guys, who you want to be targeting on the trade market, what rookies you should be looking to acquire, some stash plays, and obviously some game predictions. So let's dive right in with some of the top stories. Jared Goff and the Rams made that huge statement on Thursday night, and what he showed us is that you got to play all of your Rams and all of your studs. So Cooks, Woods, Gurley, Kupp, Goff, all have to be in your lineup. They are bonanza right now. They are unstoppable, and they clearly look like the favorite in the NFC. On the other side of the ball, because of the porous Vikings defense, Kirk Cousins is now forced to throw the ball all over the yard. So stock up for Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph, eventually Dalvin Cook when he gets back to being healthy, and of course Kirk Cousins. But remember something. Goff struggled against the Vikings last year, exploded for his 5 touchdowns last night. He sure seems like a surefire QB1 for the rest of the season. Second big matchup of the weekend in terms of bonanza potential is the Falcons and the Bengals. We saw what happened last week when the Falcons and Saints met up inside the Dome. There were points galore. So whereas Drew Brees went off last week with his complement of Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara, expect Andy Dalton, Tyler Boyd, A.J. Green, and Tyler Eifert, not to mention Gio Bernard, to all get theirs this weekend. Dalton and Boyd are great plays in DFS with their cheap salaries. Then you can never count out Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, Tevin Coleman, and Matt Ryan. Check injury reports on Devontae Freeman, who may return this week from injury. Then the Dolphins. Are they really legit? Are they for real? Can they really take a 3-game lead in the AFC East only 4 weeks into the season? Ryan Tannehill's looked good. Amendola's looked fine. Kenny Stills is the play here, and we'll talk about Kenyon Drake in a moment. But Tom Brady and that offense has struggled. Can you trust him? I certainly think you have to this week. You can't bench Tom Brady. He's just that good. But guys like Hogan can be benched. Michelle, now with the injury to Burkhead, is a must-play for me as a running back too, as is James White. And Gronk, of course, has to be in your lineups. But if you're looking for a streaming option, Ryan Tannehill's not a bad play, considering what we saw the Jags and Lions do in consecutive weeks. Then there's Baker Mania out in Oakland. Look, the guy is a leader. We said this last week. He came on to the upset win against the Jets, and now he travels to Oakland and the Black Hole. He's primed for another nice matchup here. He's only a 2.5-point underdog, and Mayfield may have the best rookie performance this week. More on that coming up. And then the fantasy bonanza that is Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs offense. Huge game Monday night in Denver. They go on the road into Mile High, where Mahomes made his first start of his career last season. And Case Keenum and the Broncos try to keep up in the Mile High City. It will be very interesting to see how his weapons keep up and if they're able to score with the Chiefs. Some question and answer here right off the bat. We took your questions within the forum and on our main Phantom page this week. Then we got some answers for you. So the first question, better start this week, Tyler Boyd or Allen Robinson? I actually like both matchups for these guys. Tyler Boyd against that porous Falcons defense, and Robinson against the Tampa Bay Bucks defense that's got lit up this year by the Saints, amongst other teams, and the Steelers in Monday Night Football. But for me, the choice is Boyd. Look, I think the Falcons defense is going to key on A.J. Green, which should open things up for Tyler Boyd. 2 straight games, 6 catches, over 90 yards, and a touchdown. He's been extremely successful. He's been extremely diligent with working with Andy Dalton in practice, and for me, he's stepped up enough to trust him. Allen Robinson has become Mitch Trubisky's best target, of course, with him having the most skill set on the team. However, the target number is much lower than Boyd, and I think they're going to play much more conservative this week at home, especially with Trubisky. So for me, the answer is Boyd. Best rookie QB performance was another question that came in this week, and Baker Mayfield is the choice. Think about the matchups. Josh Allen in Green Bay. Can he really do that 2 weeks in a row? We'll see. Sam Darnold on the road at Jacksonville? No thank you. Then you got Josh Rosen starting for Arizona this week in his first start of his career. I'm not going to trust him there. Lamar Jackson obviously is not going to play and start for the Ravens this week against Pittsburgh. So for me, Mayfield's the choice. He goes and plays an Oakland team that's in shambles. They're 0-3. And despite being on the road, I think Mayfield has the most confidence going right now. They're coming off a huge win. I actually think the Browns win the game outright and win their first and have their first 2-game winning streak since the War of 1812. And Mayfield gets the win, and he has the best fantasy day. So there's the answer there. And the last question for this segment is Ezekiel Elliott, and he's ready to bust out. Look, the Cowboys' offense is atrocious. but Zeke leads the league in rushing, and they're going to keep feeding him the rock as much as he possibly can take. He has a very solid matchup this week against a Lions team that, despite holding the Patriots down last week, has struggled against the run, as evidenced by Matt Breida's performance in Week 2. So for me, Zeke's going to have a huge day, and I know on the DraftKings panel that I sat on earlier this week, Zeke was a top play for many of the people on that panel. So for me, Zeke is a play. You got to roll with him, especially in a yearly league where you obviously use the first-round pick on him. So Zeke, go do it for everyone out there who owns you. Let's talk about some stock up and stock down guys now. Calvin Ridley, we saw what he did last week. More on him in a second. You also have Aaron Jones of the Packers, Tyler Boyd, as we mentioned, Sterling Shepard of the Giants, and Josh Rosen of the Cardinals. Let's start with Calvin Ridley. Last week was his coming out party. 3 touchdowns in the first half against the Saints. Was able to draw pass interference calls deep into the Saints' territory. He's established himself as a clear number 2 receiver in Atlanta, passing Mohamed Sanu. And with all of the attention that is squarely on Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley becomes an interesting play week in and week out as one of your wide receiver 2s. In DFS leagues, Ridley's a great play because his price is still relatively low. In a game that should be a shootout with the Bengals, he's a great play. You then have Aaron Jones, the running back from the Packers. Jamal Williams failed to impress in his trial earlier this season. Ty Montgomery is certainly not a durable running back that you can count on week in and week out. But for me, Aaron Jones is a solid play. He was great last year and has established himself as a playmaker for the Packers who need that running attack. Then you have Tyler Boyd as mentioned. 2 straight games, 6 receptions, over 90 yards, and a touchdown. In what should be a fantasy shootout and bonanza, give me Boyd in my lineups as a clear number 3 and a high-end number 2. Then there's Sterling Shepard. No Evan Ingram, no problem for Sterling Shepard. 2 games with over 7 targets already this season. He scored his first touchdown once Ingram went out last week in their win against the Texans. And now he gets a Saints team that just got lit up like a Christmas tree by Calvin Ridley, who's their second receiver. So while many would play OBJ this week, remember, Julio Jones was not the game breaker last week. That was Ridley. So if Sterling Shepard could do much the same, then we can certainly have something to talk about as he'll have another breakout performance and his stock will clearly be up. Now for some stock down guys. We got Robbie Anderson of the Jets, Case Keenum of the Broncos, Kenyon Drake of the Dolphins, Chris Hogan of the Pats, and Latavius Murray of the Vikings. Let's start with Robbie Anderson. See this catch here? Week 1, 41-yard touchdown strike from Sam Darnold against the Lions? This is his biggest play of the season. And this accounted for the game in which he had the most yards, 41, which came on this one pass. He just is not seeing enough targets, 10 through 3 weeks. And against the Jaguars, you certainly know that Anderson's stock will never be lower. He's a buy low candidate next week, but for this week, he's stock down. Then you got Case Keenum. Look, 3 touchdowns and over 300 yards in the opener here against the Seahawks in Week 1. Great start for Keenum's career in Denver. However, the last 2 weeks, despite winning in Week 2, have been a struggle for Keenum, who's now tied for the league lead in interceptions. He simply cannot be trusted in any format, and although he has a dream matchup against the Chiefs, if you have him in yearly, I wouldn't be playing him. In DFS, where his salary is low, that's another story. If you want to wait till Monday night to see your quarterback play, Keenum's not a bad option, given his low salary and probable usage rate this week. Then you have Kenyon Drake, who last year on Monday Night Football busted out, and yes, that was Jay Cutler handing the ball off to him, against the Patriots. And what you would think is a physical mismatch against the linebackers that Drake owns, he only got 5 carries for 3 yards last week in a win. Frank Gore's still there. Balaj still may get some carries. So can you really trust a guy that got 5 total carries last week against the Patriots? It'll be hard to trust Drake in that format this week. Now let's talk about some guys that you want to make sure are in your lineups this week. Eli Manning, Gio Bernard, Michael Crabtree, Sony Michel, and the Chargers defense. Let's start with Eli. Again, dream matchup against the Saints. The guy will throw the ball over the yard. It looks like he had better protection last week in their win against the Texans. I don't trust anyone on that Saints defense to stop Eli or OBJ or Barkley or Shepard. I think he has a big afternoon. The weather should be nice later today in the Meadowlands for the game against the Saints. So start Eli with confidence. Then you got Gio Bernard. Just look at what Alvin Kamara did last week against the Falcons. 20 targets, over 10 catches, a ton of yards, and that's Gio's specialty. Last week, over 60 yards and a score, about 5 receptions for Gio. And as long as Joe Mixon does not get on the field this week, I love Gio this week as a running back 2 in yearly leagues and as a running back 2 in DFS leagues. Then there's Michael Crabtree. This was his touchdown in the opener for the Ravens, and he has a great matchup this week against the Steelers defense, just doesn't exist. Look what Mike Evans did last week. Deshaun Jackson, O.J. Howard, Cameron Brate, Chris Godwin. Michael Crabtree's almost as talented as all of those guys outside of Evans. You gotta play Crabtree if you own him. Now let's talk about some guys to bench. Jordy Nelson, David Johnson, George Kittle, yes, Carson Wentz, and Josh Allen. Let's start with Jordy Nelson. Last week, he was a breakthrough for him. Over 100 yards. Opening play of the game almost took it to the house. A few plays later got in the end zone. But this week, he's taking on a Cleveland team that's pretty rock solid. With Denzel Ward playing at an all-pro level in his rookie year, Jordy Nelson may be struggling to get open as much as he was this last week against the Dolphins. Much the same, George Kittle is in a bench spot this week. With the injury to Jimmy G and C.J. Beathard under center, you just cannot trust Kittle in any way, shape, or form this week. Let's see how C.J. Beathard plays before we get Kittle into a lineup, and that also goes for Marquise Goodwin as well. And then there's Carson Wentz. Great that he's back from injury. Great that he got through the game healthy. But all told, the Titans have yet to give up a quarterback to go over 300 yards yet this season. Wentz threw 1 touchdown, threw 1 interception in his debut. He also got sacked 5 times. He only rushed 3 or 4 times. To me, this matchup does not scream confidence, especially with the lack of weapons on offense for Mr. Wentz. Yes, he's got Ertz, and yes, he's got Gooder, and yes, he's got Aguilar, but no other receivers are there. No Mike Wallace, no Alshon Jeffrey, and now his running back contention should be back, with Jay Ajayi likely to return, Corey Clement likely back, and Wendell Smallwood, who played well last week in the win over the Colts. So will they put more on Wentz's shoulders this week? Well, we'll stay tuned. Now let's talk about some Week 4 game picks and why some of those guys that we already mentioned are stock up or stock down. For me, we won last night with the Rams, minus 6.5. That's all we needed. It was 1/2 of a point, and we got that win. For me, I'm going to take the Pats over the Dolphins in Week 4. I think the key to this matchup will be Sony Michel and how he establishes himself in the backfield for New England. With Rex Burkhead being out now for the foreseeable future with a neck injury, Michel is the main guy on this offense to handle the rock. James White will get the ball out of the backfield on passing downs, but Michel is exposed now to the league for a few weeks, and I expect him to be very big this week and the difference maker, yes, the difference maker, against the Dolphins. Another pick that we like is Cincinnati +4 against Atlanta. I think this has fantasy bonanza written all over it. I do think both teams will score points. I think at the end, the Falcons maybe get a late field goal and win by 3 or win by 1. I like Dalton being able to keep up with Matt Ryan. I think he's got the weapons. A.J. Green's healthy, or at least he says he is. So I'll be confident in A.J. Green this week. I think Gio Bernard has a huge game, as we mentioned. So give me the Bengals +4. We also have Green Bay minus 9.5 against the Bills. I think if this was any other team, I'd be very concerned about the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. Simply put, Rodgers does not look healthy. It looks like he needs to have that surgery. And if the Packers struggle over the next month or 6 weeks, I wouldn't be surprised to see Rodgers get sidelined for the year, let him rehab that knee, get the surgery, and come back next year. Remember all of the money they spent on him this past offseason. But for now and this week, I cannot see the Josh Allen-led Bills go into Lambeau after going into Minnesota and coming out with a win. And I think the Packers are desperate. They tied the Vikings. They lost to the Redskins. They need this game badly. Let's go with more picks. Cowboys and Lions. I liked what I saw last week on Sunday Night Football as the Lions trounced the Patriots, while the Cowboys looked like a lackluster team on both sides of the ball against the Seahawks, who really have no offensive identity right now, especially with Doug Baldwin not there. So for me, the pick is the Lions. Give me the field goal. I'll take that any day of the week. I think the Cowboys will be hard-pressed to stop the Detroit receivers. No Sean Lee means Kerryon Johnson and LeGarrette Blount may run wild. No one's there to really cover Theo Riddick out of the backfield. So give me the Lions +3. Then we have the Jags. I simply cannot trust Sam Darnold in Jacksonville against a team that got embarrassed, really embarrassed at home last week against the Titans. Not because of the score, not because it was a blowout, because they couldn't put any points on the board. You can't lose 9-6 games in the NFL and expect to be considered a contender like the Jags are. Getting Leonard Fournette back will help. That'll ease things on Blake Bortles. I think the Jags win this one by 10 or 12 points easily. And I don't think that the Jets have any way to do a backdoor cover here. So for me, give me the Jags. And then the Bears, -3 against the Bucks. I think the Fitz magic is starting to taper off here. You saw the 3 interceptions in the loss against the Steelers on Monday Night Football. I think the Bears have one of the best defenses in the league. They're putting tons of pressure on the quarterback. John Gruden, you traded them Khalil Mack. So don't keep complaining about not having a pass rush. But what Max brought to that team is some additional intensity. I like them playing at home. I like them slowing down Fitzpatrick. And I think Trubisky and Jordan Howard make enough plays to get the Bears the win. Then we'll take the Eagles, -3.5 against Tennessee. Look, the Tennessee Titans have no quarterback that can throw the ball consistently. Mariota cannot make all the throws right now. Derrick Henry's been a bust this season. The wide receivers haven't stepped up. There's still obviously no Delaney Walker who's out for the season. And I think Wentz in his second game back is going to get into more of a rhythm. I think with Jay Ajayi back, that obviously lengthens the amount of weapons on the team. I think Zach Ertz has a big day. I think Aguilar gets back into rhythm. So give me the Eagles, -3.5 after a lackluster performance against the Colts last week. I think they rebound here. In our final slate of games, I like the Seahawks at Arizona. They get Doug Baldwin back this week. That's why the number's a little bit lower. I don't trust Josh Rosen in his first start at home, even though it's at home. I want to see the chemistry develop between Rosen and Christian Kirk, who's an explosive player and rookie out of Texas A&M. So for me, I'll still take the Seahawks and Russell Wilson on the road. As mentioned earlier, I think the Browns are going to win this game outright. I think Baker Mayfield has a nice afternoon. I think he gets Landry involved. He hits a deep pass to Callaway. The key will be Njoku and Carlos Hyde at the goal line. The Raiders are a mess. They are a complete mess with dysfunction all over their organization. Give me the Browns to win outright on the road. I put a little extra shekels on that money line. Then we got the Chargers and the 49ers, and this is one of my best bets of the week. The Chargers are unstoppable on offense. No one has slowed them down. And remember, the key here is the Chargers have got lit up on defense by two of the best offenses in football, the Chiefs and the Rams. The Bills obviously put up a bunch of points last week on the Vikings, but again, the Bills aren't terrible, especially at home. The Chargers went cross-country and throttled them. So how is C.J. Beathard going to do against this Chargers defense? I just can't trust it. I think the Chargers win this one by 2 touchdowns at least, so give me them as a best bet this week. Then you got the Saints and the Giants. I do think the Saints, despite the fact that they're playing outdoors, which is sometimes a struggle for them, have the edge here. I'm not buying into the Giants' offensive line that they fixed all of their issues. I think the Saints get enough pressure on them. I think this game has fantasy bonanza potential, as we mentioned, with Thomas and Kamara and Breeze and OBJ and Shepard and Eli and Barkley. But I still think the Saints win by at least a field goal in the Meadowlands, which would be a nice day in Jersey. Then we got the Ravens +3 against the Steelers. Look, the Steelers defense can't stop anybody, including the Bucs. I think Flacco has the familiarity against going against the Steelers. He's got a two-headed monster at running back, which I like. For fantasy purposes, I don't like it, but for this game I do because they can pound the rock against the Steelers. They have enough receivers to make it happen, and I'm getting a field goal in this game that's always a close contest. Give me the Ravens. And then the Chiefs against the Broncos on Monday night, another one of my best bets. I just cannot see Case Keenum keeping up with, not with the Kardashians, but with Pat Mahomes. Think about it this way. The Chiefs have played 3 games, and they've covered them all. They were an underdog at the road against the Chargers. They were an underdog against the Steelers, and they won outright, obviously, and covered that spread. And then last week they covered. And so for me, this week, they're going to cover again, go on the road. Mahomes won't have any problems. I don't think that the Broncos are going to keep pace with the Chiefs receivers and Kareem Hunt out of the backfield. I think the score will be somewhere around 31-20. Might be a little higher, obviously, for the Chiefs. But those are our Week 4 picks in the NFL. And let's do one other round of question and answer before we kind of give you some bold predictions for the week. This one came in as a very interesting one. Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, a better DFS play this week? For me, if I'm playing DFS, I'm actually not going to take those two guys this week. I think they're too expensive. I like a Matt Ryan, an Andy Dalton, even an Eli Manning better this week, even a Drew Brees this week. But if you're going to play one, I'm going with Brady. Simply put, Rodgers is one bad move and one bad step away from being out for the game. Tom Brady's not. Of course, that's theoretical. However, Brady is also motivated. Would you remember the last time they lost 3 games in a row? I can't, and I'm a Pats fan. So for me, I think Brady bounces back. He lights it up. I think Josh Gordon plays today, makes an impact on the field, whether with a catch or opening things up for the rest of his teammates. I also think Chris Hogan bounces back today, and as I said earlier, I think Sony Michel eases the pressure on Brady, opens things up, and Brady will have the better day of those two. The next question, trust any Eagles running backs this week? No. The answer is no. Last week we thought it was going to be the Corey Clement show, as well as he played, Wendell Smallwood played better. Now Jay Ajayi's back. Darren Sproles is out. To me, you got Ajayi, Smallwood, and Clement, all who could score, all who could do things. I think if you're going to play one, you're going to play Ajayi, who probably will get the goal line work, as we saw in the opener. So for me, I would stay away from all of the Eagles running backs this week, but if you're going to play one, play Ajayi. Second half players to stash is always a great question, because when you're an owner and you want to stash guys for the second half that we think are going to take off, or even in a keeper league where you want to stash guys towards the end of the season, there are always names to remember. The first one for me is Michael Gallup of the Cowboys. Yes, the Cowboys look like they are a hot mess right now and they can't throw the ball anywhere. But theoretically, their offensive line is going to improve. That'll make Ezekiel Elliott more of a weapon, and it should open things up for a guy like Michael Gallup, their rookie wide receiver from Colorado State. Speaking of rookie wide receivers, I like Cortland Sutton in Denver. Hopefully, Keenum continues to play at the pace where he's chucking the ball over the yard. They have Demaryius Thomas, yes. They have Emmanuel Sanders, yes. But are they going to look to develop the talented rookie from SMU? I do really think so. So Sutton's a name to look at. Another name we mentioned earlier is Aaron Jones. I think sooner or later they're going to realize he's the most talented running back out there for the Packers, and he's going to be the starter. So I would absolutely grab him and stash him on your bench, or even play him this week as a potential flex option. Sony Michel's another name to grab now, especially he's going to be the bell cow for the Patriots. And there are plenty of other names as we'll dive into later this week on the forum. So certainly hit me up for those questions about other guys you could potentially stash in your league. And here's some bold predictions for this week. I think Tyler Boyd yet again outscores A.J. Green. He did it last week when Green went out with an injury. I think he does it again against the Falcons. I think Aaron Rodgers does not finish this season. As I mentioned, as soon as the Packers start struggling, they're going to take a look in the mirror and say, we're not going to win this year. Let's take a step back, rest Aaron Rodgers, get him healthy for next year. So I really do think that's a great possibility that Rodgers will sit at some point this year. That's why earlier in the week, I said to trade Aaron Rodgers if you're in a yearly league and see what you can get for him. I also don't think Ryan Fitzpatrick's to finish the year. As great of a story he has been over the first 3 weeks of the season, as the first quarterback in the history of the league to throw for 400 yards in 3 straight games, Jameis Winston's there, and they're not going to bench him for the whole season. He's another name to potentially grab given the potency of this offense so far. So if Winston's on that waiver wire, I would grab him if you had an extra spot, because who knows? The sky's the limit with this offense as it looks so far. But Fitzpatrick threw those 3 first-half interceptions against the Steelers last week. I think he struggles again this week against the Bears, and it wouldn't shock me if he does struggle to see Winston in the second half. Earl Thomas is going to be dealt before the deadline. I just think there's too much water under that bridge. I think the Cowboys are an option. I think other teams that are looking for a safety are in contention. I think the Vikings could use one. If the Rams are still banged up in the secondary in a few weeks, Thomas could be a name there. So keep an eye on Thomas. And I also think that Le'Veon Bell is going to be moved before the deadline. Again, the Steelers team doesn't like him. You've heard about all the infighting. They're a mess. If they lose again this week to the Ravens in what could be a toss-up game for me, and I actually took the Ravens, and I'll actually think they might win outright, Bell is the one that they want to get out. They want to get the draft picks for. James Conner's done an admirable job starting at running back. So for me, Le'Veon Bell, whether it's the Packers or the Jets or the Colts, one of those teams might step up and say he's the missing piece to get us to the playoffs. And maybe in terms of the Jets who have all this money next year, he's a long-term answer and they give him that long-term contract. So for me and Adam Yakuta, thank you so much for watching the All Out Blitz this week. We'll be back live next week. And make sure to continue watching us on the forum every Sunday morning and uploading comments through the forum throughout the week. Have a good week.